Mr. Grinstein, I would like to ask you, what are your opinion towards the Arab awakening that has been transpiring in the Middle East? And how do you view its the consequences to Israel? Do you have any hopes or concerns?
Generally speaking, we feel in Israel that we have been scapegoated for a lot of the issues of the Arab world. If you're looking at the lack of economic openness, participation of women, democracy, etc., etc., yeah. And if you remember the famous report by the United Nations, on the state of development of the Arab world, where all of these issues were raised, the response by many Arab intellectuals prior to the Arab Spring was Israel. Israel is the reason for all of our problems. And I thought and I felt that it is really unhealthy that when we have an agreement, a peace accord with Egypt, there's actually only a very small group at the top of Egypt that we speak to, that we engage with, etc. So moving forward, we would really like to see, from the Israeli perspective, a much broader engagement with the Arab world. And what I'm saying now is not the vision of the left-wing peace camp in Israel. When you look into the right, when you look into people that express right-wing ideology in Israel, they are also talking about broad engagement with the Arab world and with Arab intellectual leadership. And this is something that we would like to see happening. So generally speaking, the democratization of the Arab world should have been a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, a lot of people here are very concerned that what is emerging out of this process of democratization is a takeover by some radical groups that are deeply hostile to Israel. At the moment, we're still very cautious, but there are some worrying signs around us. We're particularly worried right now about the prospects in Syria.
Yeah, thank you. That's right.
And Jerry, your comment on that, please.
Well, there's a lot of with the Arab awakening that's going on. One thing I want to point out is that maybe not to the same scale as what's happening in Egypt and in Israel, but there's a lot of this going on all over the world. We see it in Europe. It's going on in the U.S. and Canada. There's a lot of, excuse me, there's a lot of countries around the world where people are not quite as active maybe as they are in Egypt, is speaking up with what the government is doing, and as far as even constitutions. But there are groups in almost every country you can look around, with the exception of a few. I mean, Turkey even has a few groups where people are protesting for one reason or another. The U.S., we have people that are doing the same thing. Now, when you look at Egypt, the problem here, I think, with the Constitution, and I would have to agree on the most part with Mr. Grinstein, is that to have a constitutional government, you have to have one that is supported by the majority of the people. And I think that's going to be a problem there. I think it can be worked through, but I think that's where some of the problem stems from. And when you look at past histories, there's a lot of mistrust on both sides, especially when you look at the councils in Egypt. There are a lot of old regime members still in place there. There's a lot of social discourse in Egypt right now. And all this stuff can be worked through. But when it comes to the point where they put up a roadblock as far as talking or negotiating, I think that's where we're going to have a problem. And we need to figure out some way to work through that, which I do think is possible. There's a lot more ways to handle things than going to war. The thing of it is we have such high tensions all around the world right now. There's tension everywhere. When you look at Jews or Israelis that are in America, or Muslims in America, or Americans overseas, we see tensions there too. And a lot of this, the way it gets solved, is by talking. You have to be able to listen, I think. If I had to say anything to the governments in that area, as far as somebody not connected to the political spectrum, would be to listen to what the public is saying on the majority. Because without having the majority of a population to support a constitution, it's going to be very difficult to have a constitution that will work when nobody will support it.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.